What does the VA backlog mean for your disability claim? Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and about a month ago, I posted a video talking about the Veterans Administration's backlog for claims. The interesting thing that I discovered is that every week, the VA publishes a Monday morning workload report that summarizes the amount of claims that they have in inventory and the claims that have gone past 125 days. The VA provides some simple charts, but I gotta be honest, it's nothing to get too excited about. So I asked you guys if you thought we should dig deeper into this, and I got some positive responses, so here we go. In this video, I'm gonna explain the data that's included in those weekly reports, because as you can imagine, some of the data is very important to us. Then along the way, I'll show you some charts that I built that I think start to tell a story here. You should not be surprised that along the way, I'm going to go down a couple of rabbit holes that'll help make what you're seeing make more sense. Mathematical challenge that I have not been able to figure out, but if one of you guys could help me, I think it would illuminate this significantly. To get started, the Monday morning workload report has a lot of data. But the information that we're most interested in comes from the Transformation tab. This worksheet summarizes all the data at the end product level, and in a second I'll explain what an end product is. The rest of the document slices and dices this information into station of origin or station of jurisdiction or state or regional office. First, I thought all that information was somehow going to be useful to us, but the VA uses something they call the National Workload Queue. The basic idea of the National Workload Queue is to electronically distribute claims across all stations to optimize the workload. This National Workload Queue was rolled out in 2015 and 2016, not without some problems, but for our purposes, I'm not going to drill down to individual stations. I'm just going to focus on the national level data. Okay, the next thing to understand is the notion of a rating bundle. A rating bundle is a collection of documents that require a rating decision as part of their processing. And a rating bundle is the unit of measure for the Monday morning workload report. So you can have an incredibly simple rating bundle, or you can have a massive one. But the VA tracks their workload based off the number of these bundles. The VA categorizes these bundles by what they call an end product code. For example, end product 10 is a rating bundle that is an initial entitlement claim that has 8 or more service-connected issues associated with it. Broadly speaking, I lump end products into 3 categories: initial, supplemental, and Agent Orange. That's my binning, not the VA's, but for our purposes today, I think it's sufficient. Maybe we'll dig deeper at some point in the future, but we'll see. The final point about the Monday morning workload report is that it really only contains 2 pieces of information, and figuring out a way to squeeze as much information as we can from that, well, that's the challenge I'll talk about at the end of the video. Those 2 measures are the number of rating packages pending a decision and the number of rating packages that have been pending a decision more than 125 days. All right, so now let's look at some charts. The first chart is just the VA claim inventory. The green bars indicate the number of rating packages pending decision, and the red bars are the number of rating packages that have been pending for more than 125 days. And let's just get oriented because we're going to use this basic structure over and over again. The axis at the bottom is laid out by quarter. Yeah, it's a weekly report and I have all of the weekly data, but converting it into a useful form is unwieldy, so for now we're just looking at the quarters. One special note is that January 2024 quarter, that's actually December 16th of 2023. That was the most current data that I had when I got started. And that means that if I update this in the future, that bar is going to move around a little bit. Also, notice that I have shaded the background gray for the COVID lockdown time, and then gold since the signature of the PACT Act. On this first slide, The green and red bars should be compared against the left-hand axis because they represent the number of end products that are in the workload report. The right axis is the percentage of the inventory that is over 125 days. And right now, I'm not showing that on this chart. Just to hit the highlights from what we can see is that things were pretty good from 2015 until COVID hit. That was due in large part to that national workload queue that I talked about earlier. Then the backlog starts to go up during COVID because it's taking longer for an individual rating packet to get a decision. See that uptick in inventory in July of 2021? That is not COVID related. I'll explain that in a second. Then in late 2022, just as the backlog is starting to get under control, the PACT Act hits and causes its own spike. Now, let's overlay a black line to represent the percentage of claims that are over 125 days. And you're going to read that against the right-hand axis. You can see that the backlog went up in the middle of COVID and was almost back to normal before the PACT Act came along. Now, let's look at the same information, but this time we're going to break it down by initial claims in blue, supplemental claims in gray, and Agent Orange claims in orange. Here you can see that the spike in inventory that happened in July of 2021 was actually due to Agent Orange claims. And, not surprisingly, the PACT Act was driven by an influx of supplemental claims. All right, rabbit hole time. You might wonder why Agent Orange would suddenly appear in the inventory in such large quantities. This is actually due to a 1986 challenge to the regulations the VA used with regards to Agent Orange. In 1986, the only condition assumed to be connected to Agent Orange was chloracne. The National Veterans Legal Services Program filed a class action lawsuit called Nemmer versus the Department of Veterans Affairs. And in 1991, the Veterans Administration settled with a consent decree, which basically said two things. Number one, when scientific evidence shows that there's a correlation between a disease and exposure to Agent Orange, then the VA will go back through all previously denied claims that mention that disease and review them. And number two, the VA pays benefits retroactively. That 2021 spike was related to a court order to review the so-called Blue Water Navy issues associated with Agent Orange. It just so happened that it occurred at the tail end of COVID. All right, so let's take a look at the impact of all these PACT Act supplemental claims on the processing time of initial claims. This chart focuses on initial claims with 7 or fewer issues, that's the solid blue, or 8 or more issues, that's the hashed blue. I kind of find it interesting that there's an increase in the smaller claim packages. But what I find really interesting is what happens when you overlay the percentage of those claim packages that are over 125 days. As you would expect, in most cases, the dotted line representing bundles with 8 or more issues, it's usually higher because it takes longer to process a bigger packet. That relationship got flip-flopped in the late COVID period and was back to normal by the time we hit the PACT Act. Okay, so what? I mean, I'd like to be able to give you an estimate of how long it's going to take to process your claim, but the Monday morning workload report doesn't contain the information that you would need to easily produce that kind of an estimate. I mean, all I really have is the average number of days for processing and the percentage beyond 125 days. But I don't know the number of new bundles coming in for any time period or how many bundles are completed in a time period. I know there's a mathematical way to estimate the age of claims, but I don't know how to do it right now. So if you have an idea, leave me a note and we'll chat. In the meantime, I would expect that it will take longer to process claims as long as this PACT Act inventory is there. Now, watch this video to understand how the Veterans Administration calculates disability ratings.